This is probably something that a lot of people in the space might cringe to hear, but psychedelics are the ultimate hypnotic induction and manipulation tool. Do I have to suffer because I have symptoms, or is that just my psychological response to pain signaling that's occurring? Doesn't mean that I have to be oh, I can be pain. There you are. Okay, but we work together.
People who want to go and explore and experiment with psychedelics are not thinking about contraindications, medications, or these things that you're talking about so fluently.
You cannot quite get a bag of mushrooms as quickly as ordering up a pizza, right? And you cannot get a bag of mushrooms as easily as you can a prescription for Lexapro.
If someone is using therapeutic MDMA, is there a time frame differential and sort of the healing of the receptor sites based on dosage?
This is Willpower.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Ben Malcolm, the Spirit Pharmacist. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's so wonderful to be here. A real pleasure, Kristin.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to lean right in and just dive deep. We were just talking briefly as we set up for the show, and you were mentioning, navigating wounding and expanding as the person that you are. And I would love to dive in and just ask you about a challenge or a trauma you may have experienced in your specific life that you overcame or you fought through in order to lean into the work you're doing today.
Yeah, there's probably several different things that I really could talk about to answer that. I think the first thing that psychedelics really ever did for me, or I would say psilocybin mushrooms did for me around my 18th birthday when I was camping, is wake me up to the beauty of the natural world and connect me to it. I think growing up in, let's just say, the weird societies, right? Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, right? That's the weird, right? That's the weirdness of the world, right? It indoctrinates you into a very vertically oriented, top-down, egocentric mode of thinking. And so I remember growing up, 13, 14, my parents are taking us to the Grand Canyon. I'm bored with the drive there. I don't really care to look at the view. And I'm like, can we go back to the hotel so I can play the Game Boy yet? Just where I was at, growing up. And, by the time I was 16 or 17, I don't think a parking lot and a grove of trees really looked different to me as far as the amount of animism that they had. And then after just this initial crack you open mushroom experience, camping, sitting by a lake outdoors, it was I could never see the natural world as unalive compared to, like a man-made concrete slab kind of thing. So all of a sudden I would be driving along the freeway and there's that one little tree in the median strip, and I'd be I see you, buddy, and you're waving, and wow, what a life you have growing over there. That's a pretty difficult spot in all of this, you're alone, there's not a whole lot of nutrition, but somehow you found a way, good for you, and I would have this connection with it. And so one thing I would say would just really shifted me as far as an ability to relate and commune with the natural world. That was one thing that I think psilocybin mushrooms really did first. I think in college too, right? The first couple of years we would take ecstasy or MDMA in nightlife environments, and that would be incredible, connecting with friends and dancing and things like that. But around the time I was a junior, I was in love with this girl, and instead of taking a double stack thing at 9 or 10 at night with the dudes, it would be wow, let's take a one-time 100 milligram pretty pure MDMA powder with this person that I am really in love with in that moment. And let's drink at the daytime and not mess up our circadian rhythms and just go to the beach. After I had that experience, I was well, I don't think I can ever really take MDMA clubbing again. I've been using the drug incorrectly, essentially. I was this is for deep bonding with other human beings in times and spaces where you have the ability to drop in and go really deep with them, rather than we're at Electric Daisy Carnival and everyone's got a Tootsie Pop in their mouth to stop the teeth grinding and whatever else is going on there. That was how I was introduced to that agent, right? Like how I was introduced, like, this is how you do it. And then, the fifth or sixth time in a totally different environment, a totally different way with a totally different dose, it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's what this thing is really for, right? Like you can have fun, and I don't want to discount that if you enjoy it that way that you have to stop or something like that. I'm just talking about for me personally.
Yeah.
I got introduced to ritual ayahuasca around 2013, and it's like, I don't know, like through the, you're trying to find yourself as a teenager, maybe. There's a lot of peer pressure. Again, like you're growing up in like a pretty toxic masculine culture. It's like bros over hoes and whatever other kinds of like things. It's like, oh, I remember that. Like now to like even like hear the phrase, it's like, who were we? We were sociopaths. We were on the road. We thought that like driving around at night and like knocking over trash cans with our car or something was like fun. It was like,
was that cool?
Like it was just like criminal behavior, essentially. It was what we were practicing because it was fun. It was like the Jackass era, it's like he's got these guys that are just trying to hurt each other as much as possible because it's funny. And, it's the fast way to, like, I believe even as a kid, I had a relatively strong moral compass and conscience. Thank God I could have gotten messed up and spun around, right? And there were times where, like, what way is the North Star was very, like, it's really unclear to me. But somehow I was always able to kind of like, but that's not really who you want to be, Ben. Like, do something else now. But there was a period of years there, right, where, like I did cheat on my girlfriend when I was 16, and then she found out. And then I saw how much it hurt her. And I was like I didn't have a capacity to even empathize about what it would do to another person's feelings until it was too late. And I saw what it was doing. And I was like, that's why people don't do that. That's why you just need to have a hard conversation that says, I'm not interested in you anymore, and I want to switch directions before you switch directions, right? Like it just kind of like, what are you thinking? Like you can't ever do that again. Right? Or, oh, I like that shirt at Goodwill. Maybe I'll just drop off my shirt and put the other one on and run out the door because the person is never going to catch me. I can run a 5-minute mile, or whatever. Right? Like just sort of stuff like that I'd done, and I wasn't that person anymore. Like I'd already stopped doing that stuff a number of years ago, but I'd never forgiven myself, right? Like I'd never gotten to a position of being like, and you did that, and that was bad. But you don't do it again, and you don't do it anymore because you're not a bad person. You acted badly, you behaved badly, and some of that was probably a product of your environment. Some of it you just have to own that no matter what you did in the environment, that doesn't excuse a level of personal accountability and responsibility, but you don't need to hold the judge within inside your head forever like that's still who you are, and you're still transgressing the world that way because you learned and you stopped a number of years ago. And so I had a huge forgiveness experience with ayahuasca where I was able to like forgive all of the things that I had done that were incongruent with the soul that was inside everything, and get to a place of like, and that is your past, and right, you are enough now, and you do good things in the world, and you try to show up in the best ways that you can. And then I actually think that probably the most powerful, like true thing that psychedelics helped me overcome, it's like I was a competitive swimmer. I swam Division I all the way through undergrad, through age 22. And there was something about stopping swimming. I was working as a pharmacy technician. I think I lost a lot of core strength in a short period of time. All the pharmacy bottles are stored on the ground, like the shelves go from the ground to like the ceiling, right? And if you're a 6'2" something dude, it's like, okay, well, you're bent over half the day. And then, the countertops of the world are made for people that are at least 4 inches shorter than you. So you're always like having like halfway hunched over just to like use a normal countertop and things like that. And so I don't know what happened, but I got this like weird back injury where I would have like just crippling pain, like there were times where I was just laying on the ground in agony, in a spastic back pain, being like, I think I'm just gonna have to lay here for a while because it hurts too much to move and I just can't get up right now. And that would happen for about like 1.5, 2 months out of each year. And then it would kind of recede and go away, but it would never truly go away. Like throughout my 20s, for example, I could not do a sit-up. Like I had a very special way of like getting out of bed to like not trigger the spasm and things like that. My posture was very weird. You know, I never went to a doctor about it because it was a traveling back pain. Like it wasn't in the same position all the time, which led me to believe that probably the chances of this being structural, like structurally something wrong with the bones of your back, is probably not that high. And really the things that I thought would be offered if I got medical attention would be surgery or opioids. And I was just like, well, I don't think I really want either of those things. And so I just kind of kept going with it and kept going with it. And I will say the Bikram yoga always gave me some level of relief. And that was like really the thing that kind of like also convinced me that like, if you can do something, even if it doesn't fix it, but you notice some level of improvement with this alignment and stretching routine, again, like I don't think going like an allopathic treatment route is really what you want to do in all of it. And I tried a number of different psychedelics, and you know, the serotonergic ones would oftentimes do things like they would activate some of the nerve fibers, and I would get some like twitching in my legs and things, and that would bring about some level of acute relief as well, but it would never really solve it. And then finally, when I was about 30 years old, I just kind of got tired of it in some way. I knew my posture was bad. I was just kind of like, I'm going to fix my posture. Like, I think maybe if I fix my posture, then that might be the thing that kind of like corrects it. And so I was working with this Korean body worker who was doing some postural coaching, but he would also do some like deep muscle, like psoas relief work on me and things like that. And he basically taught me, he was like, dude, you don't have any back pain or problems at all. You have referred visceral organ pain because your guts feel like iron. And you're obviously just stuffing shit in your belly. And that's probably what's going on. That's probably why it travels, and it's probably why I get this kind of thing. And so he would teach me these like psoas muscle relieving techniques that I could do just by myself as well. And so it was actually primarily ketamine, but I would say like ketamine almost mixed with some other psychedelics like MDMA or LSD that would put me in a place where all of a sudden I would see all of these like metaphysical daggers, like the times where I'd been wronged, where I'd been like stabbed in the back, stabbed in this, like betrayed, and these types of things. And these things, these daggers were just stuck in me like I was a voodoo doll or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember being like, okay, well, and the ketamine would guide me. It's like, put your arm on like this part of your abdomen here and just hold it here and just breathe deep and invite it to relax and invite it to release and be patient. Right. Because again, before that, I was like, I'm a competitive swimmer. I'm invincible. Like my body's just a robot machine. It gets up whenever I want. It goes to sleep when I want. It eats when I want. Like, whatever, right? Like through then the way of my mind had just been mind over matter, force your body to do whatever it needs to do, right? And that, I mean, you get taught that as a competitive athlete, right? It's sort of like you push through the pain. You don't say, oh, that hurts. I think I should stop here, right? Like that's not really how you do it when you're pushing the edge as an athlete. So I really had that kind of like mindset still.
Yeah, just grit it out.
Kind of like through being kind to my body, being patient with my body, asking her to release. After about a minute or few, I get this like this huge retching sound, like I was the hungriest I'd ever been, but it wasn't really hunger. And it was literally just my intestines relaxing and releasing stuff. And after that would happen, I could almost like grab the area and I would like imagine like pulling the dagger or the sword out, and it was like gone, like it was actually gone. And so now it's been 10 years and I don't have any more cyclical back pain. I can do any kind of ab or sit up workout I want. I don't have to move in any special kinds of ways. And none of it is dependent upon continued and or frequent use of the agents that kind of guided me to it. And so different psychedelics have helped me in different ways throughout my life, just generally speaking, and overcome lots of different, you know, I could talk about burnout and, you know, lots of different agents have done lots of different helpful and beneficial things at various times in my life. But I really think that the kind of ketamine healing of your, let's just call it like visceral wounding and compartmentalization has been like just the starkest example of something that felt like right, pulling a weed from the garden, like pulling a dagger out of a voodoo doll and just watching all the pain kind of like evaporate from it.
This arc of what you're talking about in your life and the use of psychedelics, because you and I have met through a couple of containers and I'm working in your program and all of this around the Spirit Pharmacist and learning from you. And it's giving me such a platform to be able to work more safely with clients. And I know from all of your work how deeply and beautifully researched and the level of pharmacology that you understand and the depth of your nerdiness, if you will, right? Like just how rich your information is. There's like never anyone I've sat on calls or Zooms or anything with that. Like you don't even need the textbook anymore. You don't actually even really, I'm sure that you're researching all the things all the time, but it's like, it's just in you at such a deep level, this level of scientific understanding of pharmacology. And what's so wonderfully, beautifully balanced with that is this conversation we just had about metaphysics, about the things that we seem to know, but we don't completely know about how psychedelics affect the body and the brain. And we know a lot, but just the beauty of you speaking from like a growth mindset and open to the opportunity to be changed by these agents, these compounds, and the exploration you had since a younger age. And so is that sort of how you knew as you were getting into being a pharmacist and working in pharmacology, like you just watched the merger of your level of curiosity around psychedelics and ways to use them safely? Because that's a little bit of what we're here talking about is contraindications and this like mystery medicine cabinet that we all have, whether that be supplementation or pharmaceutical medication that might have some interactions with all of this. So it's like, to me, the beauty is the balance that you bring of having a little metaphysical woo and belief and openness to possibility of these chemicals shifting us, these natural plants in some cases shifting us. And then the mix of the rest of your background, which is absolutely completely so technical and scientific. Yeah. So that's really
So a little bit more about the pharmacy journey or what's the...
Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit about the medication interactions, things in people's medicine cabinets. I think that there's a notion of people not thinking so deeply about what other things they might be putting in their body as they're navigating and working with more and more medication. If it comes more and more of this medicine, let's say like we may need to bucket a bit like microdosing in psilocybin versus MDMA versus some of like the big 4 or 5. I don't know if we want to talk about ibogaine. I bet a lot of people are asking you a lot of questions about that, but MDMA and psilocybin and LSD and ketamine are just sort of on repeat for many, many people, even if they haven't tried it yet. They're hearing more about it. And so as this landscape opens, I just would love for you to maybe start with a little bit of a broad conversation on why it's important to be able to understand what other things are in your body. We hear a lot of technical things about receptor sites and all this, but as the common people, it can be challenging to understand what all that means and where to start from a decision-making process.
I mean, I guess I'll start like almost just broadly thinking about psychedelic experiences. And there's a real wisdom out there that I think is actually being borne out in some of the experiments and trials out there around the idea of set and setting. So the idea that your mindset going into the experience and then the setting of the physical experience itself really tend to dictate maybe the quality of effects, how deep a person goes, maybe whether it's even more like hallucinogenic or like emotional producing in some ways. Like I think if your intention is to like have the mandala rotate and think that the iTunes visualizer is cool, it's probably more hallucinogenic than when you're like, man, I really want to get to what's underneath everything because of the bad stuff that happened to me when I was a kid. Like I'm expecting one journey to be a lot more emotional and the other one to be a lot more like, wow, look at the outside world. So where do we think about like medications and all that, or maybe just medications and conditions? I mean, conditions have signs and symptoms. And so a person is going to be likely bothered by a condition in some way. Maybe it's well managed and they don't really have signs and symptoms of it, but maybe they do. That's like one part of it impacting setting or kind of like what they're bringing to it. I think a lot of the time people hear about psychedelics and they hear about setting and they think like a good mindset is a positive mindset. They're sort of thinking like, well, if I'm in like a good mood that day, then that means that my psychedelic experience is going to be hallmarked by really good and positive feelings. And if I'm feeling a bit grumpy or low or something like that, then that means that it could be more dysphoric and I might even have like a bad trip. But I actually think that when I hear about set, I think that a good set is a prepared set and a bad set, unprepared set, right? It's like, how are we doing breakthrough clinical trials in treatment-resistant depression and treatment-refractory PTSD if we're waiting for the day they feel good? It's like, well, that's the whole point. It's like they're stuck in a pessimistic or reactive, hyper-vigilant sort of place where I don't feel good all the time is essentially where they're at. And so the idea that you need to feel a positive mood state to have a positive effect from a psychedelic, I think is kind of like bunk and like mythical in some ways. And it's a lot more about like, well, am I approaching this eyes wide open? Have I done an adequate requisite level of research on the psychedelic, or is it psilocybin and MMA? It's like, no, it's not mixed martial arts. And again, you don't have to be 3,4-methylene doxymethamphetamine. It's primarily a serotonin releasing agent. And it's kind of like, okay, that's not your job to get educated to like that kind of level. But yeah, like in a broad stroke, in one or two sentences, could you summarize what the sort of subjective or the colloquial thoughts about how MDMA subjective effects differs from psilocybin? Like, why are you picking one versus another? Like, do you know that MDMA is a stimulant amphetamine and you're 75 on 2 or 3 blood pressure medications, and psilocybin is a drug that doesn't have a lethally defined dose in human beings, right? Or have you just heard MDMA is the love drug, heart opener, and it's easier to psychologically navigate, and psilocybin is the trippy, dangerous hallucinogen that might turn on you at any moment. And so I'm deathly afraid of psilocybin and thinking MDMA is a fantastic choice for me, when one of them might actually have much higher risks of like stroke or something like that associated with it. Right? And so that's just it, as we think of psychedelics as mind manifesting agents. And so who am I? What am I bringing to the table psychologically? Like, where are all the baggage, right? The backpacks of rocks and things. How aware am I and that I'm carrying those backpacks of rocks, and how deeply do I want to examine those things, like in my experience overall? How am I feeling? Like, because a lot of conditions are kind of relapsing, remitting, or have flares and then times where they're better. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong. Like, sometimes it's like, I want to walk through fire and see if I can get to some kind of psycho-spiritual understanding of my symptoms when they're in a more exacerbated kind of place, right? Like, maybe the problem's closer to the surface or something, right? Or maybe the idea of taking LSD for the first time when I'm in a horrible bout of my rheumatoid arthritis, and just like my hands are constantly in 8, 9, 10 out of 10 pain, like maybe that really isn't what I want to think about all day. And so I actually want to time things to where I'm feeling relatively good overall and not taking PRN opioids for it, and whatever other things that could be done temporarily or not. Right? Thinking through the progressive life-threatening illnesses. Okay, they're a moving target. They've got cancer. They're medically ill already, right? And it's progressive. And so are we actually in, all things considered, probably the best window, because we've got gnarly treatments and surgeries on the docket coming up in the next few months, and God knows how those are going to go, and if there could be complications, and the window might close if things progress far enough. Or you just have a neurosurgery 2 weeks ago and you actually had a couple of seizures coming out of that. And so maybe it actually makes sense to stay on the prophylactic anti-epileptic for a month or two and pray those don't recur, and think that we're maybe in a safer position then. And so just like, where are you at with your illness? What kind of symptoms are you experiencing? Are you suspecting or even like intuitively leaning towards thinking that like that could be kind of grist for the mill in some ways, and maybe I really want to poke around the edges of some of that and sort of like examine these things that I've been told are purely physical and just sort of like bad genes from a much more psycho-spiritual type of lens, like the events that have happened to me, the things that I'm carrying, why is this showing up for me as my difficulty or challenge or barrier? What am I supposed to be learning from all of these like symptoms and suffering? Do I have to suffer because I have symptoms, or is that just my psychological response to pain signaling that's occurring? Doesn't mean that I have to be like, oh, like I can be like, pain, there you are. Okay, but we work together. You're teaching me. My body's injured in some way. Like, how do I protect this injury? What do you need? Like, what do you need, body? Instead of, you're the enemy, body. Why are you making me feel this way and I don't like it, right? That's the ego's interpretation of the body's like pain signaling. It just thinks that it's there to torture it or something like that, where the body is speaking to you. It's giving you stuff to work with, but the mind does not understand the body's language. It needs to learn it. Like the mind has to learn, like overall. It's not something that is intuitively hardwired into, I think, like most people. And then medication.
Sounds like you're mentioning also just like separating the story and the developmental years and the way that you feel to say, hey, am I giving any credit to the fact that some of the things...
Like psychedelics are great at giving you breathing because they essentially lower your ability for pattern recognition, right? And so the stories that you tell yourself become a little bit looser and up for a redevelopment, right? The way that you relate to yourself, the natural world, other people, the cosmos, the universe, spirituality, God, like metaphysics, like it loosens your ingrained belief systems and gets you perceiving the world in novel ways. And so through loosening the top ground control, like loosening the existing storylines and patterns, and then putting a person in a state where they can actually make novel observations and perceptions about the world, that's where I think a lot of I had a download and I was hit by an epiphany.
I had a download.
Right, because the stories that you normally tell yourself were suspended, and your ability to perceive and think about the world in different ways was enhanced. And that all of a sudden allowed for something completely new that had this incredible resonance of truth to it for you to just kind of like come through. And sometimes the epiphanies are like, it's a download, like I channeled something from the heavens. And a lot of the times, actually, maybe even the more common way, it's like oh my God, I've been asleep and I've known this for millions of years maybe, but I just forgot that it was true. And now that is true. And I actually did know that already, but I'm not living it and I'm not embodying that kind of like truth that I know. Like that is my wisdom. Like that didn't come out of the heavens like I didn't know it. Like it was in there somewhere, but it was trapped, it was lost, it was buried, and there it is. Like now I see it clearly. And then the medications, right? You could again look at it as like, well, okay, psychedelics are special substances, but they're not special in the sense of like, well, they have a mechanism of action. They have receptors that they bind to. They affect your neurochemistry in certain ways. And so there are certain drugs that like just share overlap in the targets, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, atypical antipsychotics all block serotonin 2A receptors, and all the psychedelics, or a lot of the tryptamines anyway, stimulate serotonin 2A receptors. And so there's going to be like a very like almost like straightforward ability to predict, well, there's likely going to be a significant drug interaction between those agents or classes. And it's probably going to be a 1 - 1 is 0 because they have opposing or antagonistic effects on that same kind of receptor. And so in some ways, some of the medication interactions I think are direct, or they're relatively straightforward and predictable based on overlapping pharmacology. And then I think that again, like you could look at it a little bit more like, well, maybe the mechanisms of the drugs actually really don't share any kind of significant overlap, or maybe the overlap is a lot more minimal and indirect in some ways. Like you can kind of connect the dots through, well, if serotonin indirectly affected dopamine and now I'm taking a drug that affects dopamine, like maybe there is some kind of like interaction there, but it sure isn't the same as like stimulating and blocking a serotonin receptor. Or maybe it's even more subtle than that. And so I think that's it too. It's kind of like, well, every drug in every therapy or every intervention that we do, set and setting matters. Like it truly does. Like we know, like we have the experiments that like if you're in pain and a nurse administers you a syringe of morphine, you get more pain relief than if a robot or infusion pumps delivers the same dose of that morphine. Because there's an element of like a human being is caring for me when I'm sick and ill, and that makes me better, right? So there's an element of human touch and human intervention changing the set and setting of stuff. You know, with other drugs that are extremely addictive, maybe like your heroin opioid types of things. You can tolerate larger doses of opioids in home environments that are familiar and comfortable to you than in unfamiliar environments. Like you can actually overdose using the same dose of heroin that you've tolerated several times at home because you're doing it in a subway bathroom on the move. Right? Like the set and setting matters as far as the intensity of effect or even the physical dangers that the drug is presenting in that like latter kind of example.
Yeah, exactly.
And so all of it kind of feeds into our, you know, and you could even look at like, well, how do I feel about the drugs that I'm using in my life? How do I feel about the medications? I feel, wow, I'm so glad that I started this agent. It lowered my blood pressure. It's now at target. I'm tolerating it well. It doesn't make me dizzy. And now that my blood pressure is lower, I feel like I'm at lower risk of having a heart attack or stroke. And I feel like I'm doing something positive for my health. And okay, am I expecting that to like show up as some kind of problem for the person? No, not really. Oh, I used to use Ambien and temazepam and touch of trazodone to like fall asleep in this weird cocktail after I had a shot of vodka too. And I got, you know, it would knock me out, but I would just get kind of crappy sleep and waking up feeling like I'm stuck to something on the bottom of a shoe. And geez, like it was. And now that I discovered Girl Scout cookies and vaporized Kush at 8:30 p.m., boy, I mean, I will rarely use an Ambien. I use like maybe like once a month when I have like a few like really nasty nights, but I'm not using benzodiazepines and I don't need that trazodone. And boy, I drift off and have this sound sleep and I don't really wake up with this groggy kind of hangover for it. And do you think I have to stop that 2 weeks before I use mushrooms? It's like, no, I think you have a strictly therapeutic relationship with it that replaced other more dangerous controlled substances and you're tolerating it well and getting a solid benefit out of it. And it sounds like you like it.
Yeah.
Right?
And given like, all of that.
Yeah, and like I use cannabis 3 times a day for my depression and I'm still horribly depressed. And I wish I could remember what was happening in my childhood when I started smoking weed all the time. And if I get nervous on MDMA, can I light a joint? And it's like, well, for you, it seems like there's a lot of like kind of like trapped feelings, shame, guilt, dog chasing its tail, kind of like symptom effects with the cannabis. And I can tell by the way that you're talking with me about it, it took a lot as far as like vulnerability to even like bring that forth. And so I'm kind of thinking that, well, kudos to you. Having vulnerable conversations around stuff is absolutely the way to begin moving the chains forward. And you know, as difficult as it may be and how weird you actually might feel in the preparation time. And you might not eat as good and you might not sleep as good and you might notice some weird anxiety and mood irritability, but that is your preparation phase. It's bringing the buried treasure closer to the surface, and it is absolutely aligned with what you want to get out of it and who you want to be afterwards. And so even though there's some level of withdrawal and feeling bad, like I'm looking at it as like priming the pump for the transformation that you want because you have a maladaptive coping relationship with the thing at baseline. And whether pot interacts badly or negatively or positively with mushrooms, it really don't matter that much at that point because it is your soul's relationship to that thing that's affecting your set. Not the direct, I mean, there is direct pharmacology of cannabinoids and psychedelics that we could think about and like talk about, right? But I use cannabis because I think that there's an example here, because I think that there is so much diversity in the use patterns. And like, yeah, smoking cannabis is fun. It can be recreation and responsible for some people. Yeah, hell yeah, cannabis has medical effects for some people. And some people it's a very tight therapeutic relationship. And some people it's a runaway train and they're kind of fooling themselves. And people don't necessarily show up in these perfect categories a lot of the time. It's like, well, it's kind of therapeutic. And let's face it, I've enjoyed it and I like to do a little bit of art at the same time. And
we're talking about, which is like so much a level of import. We're talking about mood, emotion, relationship to a pharmacological substance, to your idea of perhaps even the psychedelic. If it's the first time you're doing it, what's gone on in your developmental years? It's just what I see so often is that it's calling in facilitators as well. So if you're a facilitator and you're listening to this is like a key piece of the puzzle. Because quite often I'm going to work with and around people, and I'm just not seeing people have an intake process, or people who want to go and explore and experiment with psychedelics are not thinking about contraindications, medications, or these things that you're talking about so fluently. And I just think, what are you seeing out in the marketplace? That like, why is that happening? Are we just like, we don't know what we don't know? Or is there like a bigger picture thing that it's like too confusing? Or I see this quite often, even with other facilitators that are like, they're just not asking the right questions.
It's a quasi-legal emerging marketplace that is being commercialized as a disruptive breakthrough health technology that features incredibly strong psychoactive agents that frankly can change your mind in the most beautiful and positive ways, and frankly can change your mind in ways that you weren't expecting and maybe didn't want. Right? Like the neuroplasticity is a double-edged sword. I think it adequately explains why. You know, it's like, okay, like it makes a person more moldable. It turns them into a little piece of putty. So if I take them into a controlled environment with a solid potter, well, there's a good chance that they're going to turn into a vase that I can put some flowers in afterwards. And if I take them with somebody that hasn't done too well in their last couple of jobs and has some really weird relational sorts of personality traits going on, and they heard they could make $1,000 every weekend by guiding people with MDMA and releasing their trauma, and they found that there are 6 to 8 week training programs claiming to put you in a position to comprehensively and expertly be able to do this for people. Right. So some people, it's like they just don't know what they don't know, and their heart's actually in a decent place, and they're just incompetent and really inexperienced and heard about psychedelics in the pandemic, and now they're out there doing it for people. Right. And then, I mean, frankly, like this is probably like something that a lot of people in the space like might like cringe to hear, but like, psychedelics are the ultimate hypnotic induction and manipulation tool. Like there's a reason that the Manson murders and case are so famous, right? Is because sociopaths and narcissists, expert manipulators, are always looking for ways to expertly manipulate people. And now you've got really vulnerable populations, people that are desperate with cancers, people with mental health conditions that may not be really thinking very clearly about the level of risk. They might be strapped on a budget and really just sort of like that facilitator will do it for $400. That one charges $1,400, you know? And so what are my options except for take the one I have in front of me? Maybe I'm living in a state or a place that my perception is that my psychedelic options are extremely limited, and I found someone. So they're my person because I don't know anyone else and I haven't encountered anyone else. And it's a quasi-legal emerging industry that doesn't have clear standards. And so what should I even be looking for as far as a preparation process and things like that? I'm coming from a world of traditional medicine where the doctor just gives me a prescription, says take one every day and you're going to feel better. So I'm not thinking of psychedelics as this stuff that's going to open these internal things and is going to be like this personal work, and it's going to be like this process that I go through where it might actually get worse before I get better. I could go through these like bottlenecks of my psyche, and like they're just not thinking about it. And part of it is like prohibition. We have been systematically robbed of this information. It's people like, wow, you spirit pharmacist, look at all this information on your website. This is incredible. It's like, yeah, well, thank you. I feel affirmed that I've put this information together on my website, but why is it that an N of one pharmacist could almost like take over the movement? Like my thoughts about all of this is like etched on a stone tablet or something, while the National Institute of Mental Health's webpage just says, don't do mushrooms because you might have a hallucinogenic bad sort of experience, right? So the reality is that the standard of care isn't there. It's the absolute Wild West, right? You've got a huge diversity of people as far as their backgrounds, intentions, baseline levels of skills, levels of training in it, and a completely unaware public that's walking into it thinking it's the same as allopathic medicine, right? And so all of those factors put together essentially creates the environment that you're pointing out as like, why is that, right? And it's multifaceted and probably makes a lot of sense in some ways. And not to say when we have standards of care, there won't be bad actors. Like I actually think that like moths to a flame, we will continue to see the manipulators, the sociopaths, the womanizers, the spiritual narcissists attracted to this field. And our job is to be vigilant of one another. Tell anyone considering a psychedelic experience that doesn't have an intake process, it's like run for the hills, right? Particularly if it's they don't have an intake process and you found them through a paid advertisement on a social media marketplace or something like that, right? Like usually the people that have the most integrity in all of this are not the ones that are advertising the absolute loudest. I mean, maybe they're advertising. There's nothing wrong with like, I mean, you got services, you got offerings, like you want to help people, like the world's got to hear about it in some way, right? But I think it's kind of clear sometimes as far as like, well, it's clear to me from my perspective, I guess, is sort of like, I think it's fairly clear to tell like which of these is probably hype, you know, which of these is professionally done and maybe they professionally advertise, but there's a level of like, wow, they have a medical director, they have a whatever, they're talking about safety, they're mentioning they have like a CPR, like an AED, like on site, like not because the drug has any high risk of arrhythmias, it's just because, well, arrhythmias can occur at any point. Like why does the mall have an AED in it? Not because malls cause arrhythmias, it's just because when you have large volumes of people coming through any particular location, you start messing with the laws of chance and probability. And if something adverse happens and you're not prepared for it, and there was some kind of intervention, treatment, drug involved, right? Then the question is always going to be like, did that cause that? And were they thinking responsibly as far as screening people ahead of time and doing what they can to prevent the preventable? And then do they have the protocols and things in place to prevent what is just not preventable and always an intrinsic risk when you use high-powered biological things like drugs, right? Like there's always some level of intrinsic risk, even under the perfect administration circumstances. And that level of risk is small compared to the asymmetric upside that these things offer, right? So we want to get people there. But yeah, there's just... in some ways, it's like, you know, exactly, we've been robbed. Like, it's a crime. Like, this information should be out there. These things should be more accessible to people. And in other ways...
Here, like the Renaissance is here. For anyone who's listening who's not hearing about psychedelics, the Renaissance is here. And I want...
And in some ways, like this prohibition thing and this sort of like lack of information, well, it's really disempowering and sad and crappy in some ways. And in some ways, like, it's kind of not a terrible thing compared to where we're at with the regulation and all of it, to have an environment where the person is forced to do their due diligence as a consumer. Like, it's a lot, you cannot quite get a bag of mushrooms as quickly as ordering up a pizza, right? And you cannot get a bag of mushrooms as easily as you can a prescription for Lexapro, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people that are coming to psychedelics are actually kind of like, man, I wish I knew as much about Prozac before I started it as I do about MDMA. Right? And so there's silver linings on all clouds, right? And I'm absolutely not a fan of prohibition and absolutely wish that there was just standardized information. And yeah, I actually hope in like 10, 15, 20 years, maybe, I really hope that I will be obsolete because there will be abundant levels of consistent and clear information available throughout the internet. And the average doctor or treatment provider will know enough about these interventions to guide people through it. Like, there'll probably be room for a decent specialist always, but at the same time, I'm really hoping that I stop getting the vanilla bread and butter. I'm on a single SSRI. What about mushrooms?
I'm in Austin, Texas. Some places I'm traveling and I'm seeing people being like, I'm on my 30th MDMA journey this month, hopefully, but this year. I'm on my 10th ayahuasca ceremony, like, all of these things. But MDMA specifically, which I know is one of like the biggest outliers, and although not a traditional psychedelic, has some of the most oxidative stress load on the body. And so I think my question around that is, if someone is using therapeutic MDMA, is there a time frame differential and sort of the healing of the receptor sites based on dosage, meaning I'm taking 80 milligrams or I'm taking 125 or I'm taking a mass protocol of like a 100 and then a 75 booster? Dependent on that level of dosage, is that going to affect how quickly, exponentially our receptor sites are going to heal? If it's like less, is then we can get back to normal? What is that for our body more quickly? Or is it really just like there's a dosage that once you hit like 80 milligrams, it's going to be a certain window of time?
There's probably not like any specific line that is going to be clear for all individuals as far as like, when do I feel like I took too much and it's really knocking me down and I feel hit hard, versus, well, I was a little bit tired for a day or two, but I bounce back pretty quick and I don't notice much in the way of prolonged mood, cognition, sleep issues, things like that. I think that everywhere that they've studied in the moderate range, which is 75 to 125 to start, and then a booster a couple hours later, 1.5 to 2 hours later, of exactly half the initial dose, right? And so 80 you started with, your booster is a fixed protocolized dose of 40 in the trial. You start with 120, you get a booster of 60. And so those kinds of dosing ranges on the lower end of things like 75, 37.5, like 115-ish to 120, 125 plus 60, 180 to 190. I don't think that the data is granular enough to really say that there's going to be large differences for most people in those types of dosing range as far as like the recuperation, the hangover times, the oxidative stress that it takes. I think that probably counseling people that you're going to feel a little tired or low for like 2 or 3 days maybe. Some people will stretch on for 3 to 7 days. That's going to be probably like par for the course. And for the benefits people are receiving, nobody's dropping out of the clinical trials for those things. And so I'm looking at that and taking it as like, well, for whatever little downside that there is on the back end of things, it's still very, very well worth the upside you're getting as far as like experience, symptom relief, things like that. I do think that once you start pushing the total doses higher than maybe 200 milligrams, that's when I do get a lot more people saying that I feel really knocked down by this, right? Or even the moderate doses, some people are, it's like, I was doing 120 and 60 and I did 2 or 3 of those. And then this last one I did, it was like, oh my God, like, it's like, actually, you maybe want to dial it back to 150 like next time, right? Like, because it's a little bit like there's 2 ways to burn out your car engine, right? One
like,
is to
where's the point of diminishing returns, right? At some point, it's like,
right, exactly. Where's the point of diminishing returns? And if you are noticing that you're getting diminishing returns, like the upside is less and or the recovery time is longer, I don't really care what doses you've been taking, to be honest. Like, listen to yourself in all of it rather than like, well, that guy on the podcast said the line was 200 and I've been taking 180. And even though I feel for worse longer, like I'm still within the fine range. It's a little bit like, well, to each their own, and like notice what you're noticing. And if you're noticing that, try longer breaks, smaller doses. You could consider some of the supplements that are around it and see if that is like helpful or like beneficial.
You don't know this about me, but I launched a supplement brand for just this reason.
Right. Like
we haven't talked about this, but yeah.
Yeah. So probably just thinking like less big of a dose, less frequently, and or really examining if I've really done MDMA 3, 4, 5, 6 times, maybe it's just literally time to switch classrooms and try a different teacher that maybe is more aligned with natural physiology and doesn't have that reputation for being oxidative stress and having the kind of like come down effect associated with it. And so that's it, is I think like probably doses higher than 200 a session start really running those risks on a more reliable basis. But listen to yourself in all of it. And anytime you're noticing I get knocked down for longer periods of time / notice that I start perseverating about maybe I should do it again, like 3-4 days later or something like that. Like I would take all those things as canary in the coal mines that I should probably take it easy or maybe even just switch directions.
Great. And then my last thing, I just want to kind of shout out to people who are listening who are like, I don't necessarily know where to go next, and we're going to give them all of your information. Is like, are there 2 or 3 big red flag items that you're like, people show up and kind of across the landscape of varied psychedelics? I know that we sort of look at psilocybin mushroom as like probably like the most congruent with most other things, but are there like 2 or 3 things that people will come to you or you don't see them knowing that are like, these are the medications that you don't want to be experimenting with, whether, you'll know the answer, but that just as a listener right now can be like, oh, okay, shout out to that. It's good for me to recognize that these 2 things don't really go together in the world of psychedelics and medication.
Okay, psilocybin is it's a classic psychedelic, doesn't have a lethally defined dose in humans, and the physical safety of it is pretty dang good, like overall. So I'm pretty bullish on the safety profile of psilocybin under lots of different types of circumstances.
But there are things that will blunt it,
generally.
right? There are things that will blunt it,
Right.
even though you don't get hurt.
Exactly. And so I would say like, well, lithium, right, really comes to top of the mind as like, okay, that really could be a prescription agent that does just seriously change the physical safety profile of psilocybin and gets it geared towards more seizures and maybe just really dysphoric qualities of effect. So lithium's kind of at my top of the list for like, yeah, that's in the real contraindicated zone. Lots of different other serotonergic, antidepressants, stimulants, things like that, things that raise monoamine neurotransmitters. And those could be SSRIs, SNRIs, your Ritalins, your amphetamines, like things that raise monoamines. Well, there's some, how does it raise monoamines? Whether it's like either going to have like a more synergistic or additive or like you're saying diminishing or like blunting effect to it. And I think a lot of the time when I'm getting like, well, there's one serotonergic agent or maybe one serotonergic agent and like a PRN sleep aid kinds of things. I'm like, those seem like regimens that it's fairly easy to get it to work still. The management's not that complicated. It's not that intensive a regimen at baseline. And so I think my confidence in being able to predict about what the drug interaction is going to be and about the management strategy that is very certainly going to be safe and very likely to produce a positive experience and results. Like I think my confidence is fairly good when it's like that 1 or 2 agents. But then, right, when it comes to like I'm on 4, 5, 6 different psychotropic agents and 2 or 3 of them you might predict can intensify some effects and 2 or 3 of them you might predict to blunt some of the effects. I mean, I don't think it's as simple as they all cancel each other out and it works like it would without those 5 agents on board. And so my confidence in, well, is it contraindicated because of lack of efficacy? You've got 4 thin cloths over a light bulb. And when you do that, it's very difficult to read a book at night, right? And the question is like, which of the 4 thin cloths made the room dim? And it's like, I don't know. You could probably get away with 1, maybe 2 thin cloths, but like when you have 3 or 4, I cannot tell you which one it is. I can just tell you there's 4 thin cloths, right? Or, I think that there have been some cases recently. I've been hearing some whisperings from some of the service centers in Oregon where they've seen some stuff that is like borderline scary or emergency with heavy psychotropic regimens to the point that it's like, well, right. Like normally I'm pretty bullish on the safety profile of psilocybin, but frankly, if you're on 2 antidepressants at the max dose and a big dose of a stimulant at the same time, it's like, your psychiatric regimen is almost, it's a polypharmacy regimen that could just be unsafe at baseline. That antidepressants and stimulants, they all have interactions with each other at baseline. Yeah. And so given that we have not tested, we've done some preliminary open label studies that have permitted people to stay on SSRIs and that's been safe and has worked relatively well for them still to the point where, yeah, okay, that's your situation. We can probably make it work. But when it comes to just kind of like the rampant psychotropic polypharmacy of America, and you're just getting people that are like, I don't know what's illness. I don't know what's side effect. I don't know which any of these things do to me. I know I feel awful if I try to stop them, but I don't know, I've never tried sequentially stopping them slowly, so I really don't even know. Like it's kind of like they're coming to you and they're like, I don't even know what's up or what's down or what's helping me or what's not helping me. There's a chain reaction of drugs and side effects going on here. Do you think mushrooms is going to fix it and work well? It's like, it might, but it feels like I'm throwing a Hail Mary pass and my confidence that we're going to score a touchdown with Hail Mary passes is not that high, because you only do that in a last resort situation where, and I'm not saying that people in a last resort situation, like I'm suicidal at my end or up on 5 psychotropics. I'm not saying you dive into this. I'm just saying that, you're asking for the Hail Mary, right? And so like, if you are looking for something that has a good probability of working, you're not going to pick Hail Marys,
Yeah. So important to know. And I think it's just important to say out loud, this is why your work exists in the world. This is why, understanding titration and tapering off, washing out medications, things like that, facilitators coming to you, even people, you're doing consults with the average person who's curious and concerned and wants to experience psychedelics. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so will you just tell everyone where they can find your good work, and they can find you and they can book time with you and they can ask more questions, facilitator or layman alike?
Yeah, so spiritpharmacist.com is where I live. I'm a psychedelic educator and psychopharmacology consultant. So I have a range of educational resources, all the way from free blogs and downloadable PDF guides and things like that, to shorter kind of webinars that I do on a pretty regular bi-monthly basis, to sort of like full-length clinical pharmacology, deep dive courses in psychedelics. I've got the consulting arm of things. And so just anybody either on their individual journey, or maybe you're a facilitator guide, you've kind of collated a bunch of questions from some cases, things like that, right? So I have standalone consult hours that just anybody can access. As you know, you're part of my subscription member resource and support program, which hybridizes the resources and the support. So you can get any of my educational resources as these standalone kind of like products, and they're yours forever. You get indefinite access that way. Or I have a subscription where it's kind of like, buying the DVD versus a streaming service, right? Where all of a sudden, so long as you're subscribed and you're renting from the streaming service, you get access to the library of courses. That includes a drug information service. So people that just have questions, that don't mind waiting a few days and getting an asynchronous response, that's included as part of the subscription. And then it's not included with the subscription, it's an additional charge, but the in-person or the virtual psychopharmacology consulting has a reduced rate for members, and I allow members to extend that reduced consulting rate to their friends, family, clients, or applicants. And so a lot of people in the member program are people that are interested in helping those that are using psychedelics, and it's essentially meant to cover their practice and allow them to extend the discount to their clientele as well. And then just recently, in the last year or a half or so, I've like put a lot of these things together and launched like a training program that focuses on the biomedical assessment, screening, medication management, drug interaction piece of it. And so that's now a 6-month training program that hybridizes some of the more detailed and technical pre-recorded courses with small group case discussions that then help us apply the material to what we might really see in the real world, and answer some questions that help us kind of think through, well, what are our options and which decisions might make the most sense and be more reasonable than some of the other ways that this could go. So I really try, spiritpharmacist.com again is where you can find me. I really try to have something for everyone, whether you're an individual on a healing journey that's just trying to get into this, or whether you're an absolute professional in the business, and like psychiatrists, medical folks are interested in material. I get a huge breadth of people with their baseline knowledges and their passions or interest in all of this.
Yeah. Well, I'm super thrilled to have you on my side and to be in all the programs and learning from you continually in this educational process. So thank you so much for being on the show and for all the deep dive of the work that you're doing and sharing in the world. It's just such a level that so many people can really just expand themselves and others.
It's wonderful to be here. It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kristin. And I can't wait to hear the episode.
Beautiful.
Yes, thank you for joining us here on Wellpower. You can submit questions, learn more, shop incredible brands, and connect with me at wellpower.life, or follow me on social at biohacking.breath.cold. From comfort to courage, friends, we're doing it. Any foul language you hear is not approved by my mother.